Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I have a subscriber who is going to recall some of his most terrifying experiences he has had throughout his life. Before we get into it, though, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. The links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. My merch is displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. And also, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe, click the like button, and please leave a comment. It really does help, and it does matter. And now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? All right, everybody. Today we have our boots on the ground DJ. DJ, how are you today?
Not bad. Can't complain.
I hear that, my friend. Last time we talked to you, you had a incident at the house, at your house, where a dogman was peeking in your window. Has there been anything happening?
No, not since they decided to play peekaboo. I haven't seen or heard nothing, thank the Lord.
Yeah, definitely. Then at almost like a couple days before or after, your wife's aunt called you and said something happened. Now, initially, you had gone up there about 2 months ago, I think, or a month ago, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Because something had happened. I don't remember exactly what it was. Disappearance. Pardon?
A smell.
Yes, that's what it was, a smell. No animals disappearing, though, right?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can fill us in on your visit that you just had.
All right. Well, she had called and talked to my wife the other day and said that she had a situation that had scared her, and all she was said is she seen something. She wouldn't tell my wife the rest, nor I. So I went up there to have my hair cut the other day. She told me in confidence what had happened. She was preparing supper for her and her husband when she's retired now that evening, and it was getting ready to come out of the oven right at dusk. So as she goes and removes the items from the oven, she goes to put the pan into the sink to let it cool. And the sink happens to be out toward the backyard, and there's a window right over the sink that peers out into the backyard and into the back pasture. And as she looked up and looked out, she seen a black streak shoot by the window, maybe 10 to 12 foot, maybe 15 at the most. And it went by so fast, so big, that it startled her. And she told her husband, he said, maybe it was a horse or something, or a bear. And she said, I know better than that. She said, a horse don't travel that fast, and a bear don't sure travel that fast, and this is bigger than a bear. Well, I went out up there and was looking around after, she had cut my hair and she had explained the situation. And whatever it was, I'm assuming probably most likely a dog man. It was actually the weight of this animal had pressed divots down into the grass, and you could see exactly where it had run through the backyard, because it actually tore sod up through the ground and made prints at least a half-inch deep into the grass, made indentations where it had ran right across the yard. I tracked it 60 yards just by the way of the mashing down in the ground all the way up to the fence before it went out into the cow pasture. So, and it was grass, so you couldn't see the print as far as, like a fingerprint, because you could see the circumference of the feet, and it was a big track, but it was K9 and the way it was shaped. I mean, like I said, you couldn't see the pads or nothing, but just the shape along the grass, you could see it looked like something like, the time and a half of like a St. Bernard track or something, but it actually had so much weight that it mashed down about a half an inch in fresh soil with grass on it. And her husband tried to argue with her and say it was a bear. And she, the way she described it, he said, well, I've never seen a bear that big in this state, so we know it wasn't a bear, and it was not no local livestock missing from some farmer's yard either. So we pretty much, with the smell, they smelled there, like you said, about 6 weeks ago, and now there's something either moving around on our property or at least using it as a escape route or a main route to wherever it's going. And, I've tried to explain to them once or twice, but she don't hear what she wants to hear, unless they see it. They're good good quality earth people. And when it comes to cryptids, the only way they're going to believe is seeing is believing. They believe there's other things out there, but the only way they're going to buy into it, the proof is actually they'd have to see it before they would believe it. But now that she's seen this compounded with the smell, she's starting to broaden her horizons a lot more than the husband is, because, like I said, he's in his early 60s and he's retired and he's hunted and fished and been a farmer and sportsman. He's more or less the type you'd have to chisel on his forehead with a toothpick and a tweezers before he would believe anything.
Right. He's that old time, I don't want to buy into this.
Yeah, stubborn as a Russian barn mule is about the way you'd put it.
Wow, that's incredible.
She's so tore up about it that she made him special order a set of blinds to put down over the kitchen sink now when it starts getting past dark and her in the kitchen. I mean, it's got that bad.
And how old is she?
She's in her late 50s.
Okay. And she's lived in Virginia
this area
all her life.
Life.
Yeah. That's, wow. Now, like you said, she was never really believing in anything because she's like her husband, you got to see it to believe it, but she's finally seeing little signs here and there that they're around, the smell, and now this.
Correct.
Jeez. And now, have you talked to her husband?
I have tried. I've talked to him about it, but it's more or less the way he dismisses. You're actually better off talking to a wall.
Okay.
I mentioned it, and he said, yeah, there's things out there that he agreed with, and there's things yet the science is yet to discover, but, I told him what their name is, Dogman, a canine human-esque like cryptid, and he said, oh, werewolf. He calls it werewolf. He said, you've been watching too many movies and playing too many games. And he said, Dad, I just dropped the whole situation.
Wow.
Because there ain't no use in trying to talk to somebody that's got that kind of attitude.
Yeah. And it's strange because, like when I first talked to you, you and I had talked, and you explained to me that a lot of people, older people, would just, talk about it real quick, but, and not really hide it, but, it was like something they just quick talk about at the dinner table, and done.
Right.
And for him to be stubborn about it like that and just not, accept it that's dangerous. That could be real dangerous for him.
Exactly. But honestly, I think he knows more than he's letting on.
Yeah.
Because he'd make little cracks, when I was in there in the kitchen talking to her, or when I was walking down the hall getting ready to leave, he'd make little cracks like, you never know what's going to show up next. Now you'll see this next time, or you'll go investigate Nesty next time. Or just stuff like that. And he'd say, well, hey, you've seen some things evidently, but you haven't seen what I have. Then he'd change the subject.
Really?
So I think he knows more than he's letting on. I think he's actually seen it.
Is he a hunter or former hunter or anything?
Former hunter. He ain't hunted in years, but yeah, he's a former hunter and sportsman.
Okay. All right. Now, when you had because I've got a lot of new subscribers, so I kind of want to enlighten people on who you are and what you've done for the channel. You are in the lower part of Virginia.
Correct. Southwestern Virginia.
Yeah, Tazewell, Buchanan, Virginia. And you had your first encounter, was it 90s or no?
1999.
Okay. And since then, you haven't gone looking for these things. It's just more or less
happenstance is more or less is what I heard the word used. Similar results to this.
Right.
It's like happens wherever I go. Sooner or later I run into something or I hear something.
Yes. Now, I had another subscriber from the same area, and they had reached out to me and told me about the caves on 460. And you immediately, I had talked to you right after, I think it was a couple days after, this guy and I had a conversation about the judge in your town and stuff like that. And that's how you kind of said, yeah, that guy's legit. He knew who the judge, the judge was kind of a shady guy or whatever. And you were like, yeah, and he knows. And then he was the one that told me about the fox creature in the caves, which you went and took pictures of that cave. I think it was right after they found right before they found the body.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
Yes. So you've been in the mix for a while now. Your friend that you had your first encounter, well, it was your second encounter with, how's he feel about these creatures now after everything? And does he still...
Oh, he knows they're for real. He just never wants to have another run-in with them.
Right. Okay. Your first encounter, can you kind of go over it a little bit with me?
Yeah, I was deer hunting. It used to be my passion, and it was first day of deer season, and I had shot and killed a 4-pointer, and was beginning to start to drag it up out of the holler up to the hillside where I could get the log road and take it on back across the fence onto our farm. And I heard something down over the ridge moving through the brush, and it was coming out of some thick stuff from lilac in a laurel thicket. And right when it was coming to the edge, it was starting to break out in the clearing, I started seeing an image through the breaks in the laurel, and it was like a brownish black, almost like a light color blonde. And I looked at what I could see through the scope. I knew that it was not walking quadrupedal. It was walking upright bipedal. And it started sniffing, sort of like a deep sniff and wheeze. And I seen it and got my optic on. I had the rifle loaded. I mean, I actually had it in the scope, not a dead shot, but I had the crosshairs on where a part of its fur and my safety was off. And I started to pull the trigger, but I didn't know what I was shooting at. And when I seen a break through the laurels that turned its head, I seen an ear and part of its nostrils. And I knew the best thing to do was to get out of there. So I left. I just left drag rope and all around the deer. I didn't even field dress it. And got out of there and met back up with my buddy who was hunting on the other end of the farm and told him about it. Well, I let a couple hours pass. We went and ate lunch, and my stepfather and my buddy's dad come back with us to help drag it out, because I was that shook up. Of course, they said we were seeing things. So we went out there and we took turns dragging it. And toward the end, I was bringing up the back. And where you cross the property boundary going to get the deer, there's a big old tree it's leaned over. It's been there ever since I can remember. And when we come out, my stepdad and his dad laughing and making fun of us, saying, you've been smoking the reefer, or you've eaten some peyote or whatever. And then we heard something howl, and it was the eeriest thing I'd ever heard at that time. And it was not like a regular howl. The lungs on this thing just blew in it forever and ever, it seemed like. Then everybody's looking at each other like, what was that? And right before we get ready to cross the fence, about 8 foot up, there's 4 claw marks coming down that tree, at least a quarter of an inch deep. And you could tell it was freshly made because the sap was bleeding out of the tree and right down to the bark, and it was dripping. And not only that, you could actually tell the indentions, like our index finger and ring finger, differences in lengths. Like with our fingers, you could see the difference in the length of its fingers by the claw marks.
Right.
And then they knew that something was up then. And we grabbed it and got on out there. And I didn't hunt that holler the rest of the deer season. But yeah, that was my first run-in back in November of 1999.
And then it was, I think, 2 years later that you and your buddy, or a while after, right?
Yeah, about 6 or 7 years later. I think it was 2006 or 2007.
And you and your buddy then, that was the same friend that you had your first encounter with. You guys went and...
No, this was another friend with me.
Okay.
Yeah, we'd had a drastic, reduction of small game in that area, and we would kill squirrels. And his grandmother would fix a squirrel gravy. Well, we'd been hunting a few weeks since season had opened, and we just wasn't seeing the number of small game, that we normally see at that time of year. And that's not just including the squirrels, rabbits, groundhogs, grouse, just turkey. The numbers were low for some reason, especially when it comes to squirrels. Anything in the trees or anything that fed from the ground or housed in the ground, we just seen the numbers were way down. I don't know if they'd run them off, they got scared, they killed some, what have you. And so we set up one night, we was going to see what was going on, and that's when it come down the hill and we heard the fence wire stretch and went through the spotlight on it. Yeah, my friend had a sort of a come to Jesus meeting, as you would say. What he's seen when the light come on put him at the foot of the cross.
Yeah.
A bad shock to the system as far as reality goes.
Yep.
And then he become a true believer. But he was willing to shoot so fast before, not knowing what it is. He didn't understand it, so therefore he was fearing what he didn't understand, so he was going to eradicate it. And goodness knows what would have happened if I wouldn't have stopped him from pulling that trigger the first time.
Absolutely.
But when he finally, I did let him shoot, he shot, and hopefully, I'm glad it did what it did. The bullet hit the ground and blew so much sod up on the thing, jumped 6 feet in the air and turned the opposite way. And you talking about moving, I've never seen nothing move that fast. I mean, even at dark, I couldn't even keep up. We couldn't hardly keep up with the light, keeping the light on as it run. It was that fast. And what gave it away was we heard a coon coming down the pasture. That's what turned us on to it. I've never seen a coon that early in the evening at dark, though. It just had got dark, running that fast. And a big old coon. I think that thing was 20 pounds.
Wow.
And to make something run like that, if you don't hear any dogs chasing or ain't no coon hunters in the woods, then some predator, has scared it bad. And coons usually don't run like that from predators. They'll climb a tree or go into their den before they'll run in an open pasture like that. So whatever it had, had done, it had got its mind off what it was doing in any known escape route, and it was just panicking. And when we heard it coming and got the light on, we could see why it was panicking. Evidently, it was chasing a coon for its dinner or what have you. But that was my second.
All right. So with all that, I'm going somewhere on this. With all of that, the location of your wife's aunt's house, in, let's say, reference to where you had your first encounter.
Hour and 15 minutes.
Okay. Was because I believe your wife's aunt's in Buchanan?
Yes.
So where was your first, what county was your first encounter in?
Tazewell County, North Tazewell.
Okay. All right. Now, before you're in Buchanan now, where you've had your last couple run-ins, prior to that, you were in Tazewell when you and I first started talking. You had, I believe, there was a Dogman that came in your yard at one point.
Excuse me. It was something. I'll tell you that. Dogman, I suspect it, but it looked looked an awful lot like a demon to me. It scared the plumb pea willy out of me, and out of all times I've seen anything had bad intentions.
What did it look like? Can you just?
It looked a lot like a hyena.
Okay.
On it, but not as tall as a normal Dogman. You would think. This thing looked like it might have been maybe 6 feet tall on twos, but it just was so massive and thick. And when I seen its face, if any canine could have a demonic look, this thing had it.
Right.
And it didn't have regular canine-like ears. These ears were shaped sort of like like an apple leaf. It looks like a leaf, but it don't have an attributing point. It's like more like rounded on the end. That's the way these ears appeared. And it had a look on its face. If it could have killed and walked through me, it would have done it. It was outside at, I think, like 2 o'clock in the morning. It was shaking the canine fence behind me of the neighbor's kennel trying to get the dog. And now I remember, Jeffrey, it was like 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember because the day after you had told me about it. And yeah, I think your neighbors were kind of on the fence about dogmen and stuff like that. I believe that you had said something about that. But
yeah.
Where that happened in reference to where you are now, 45 minutes, I believe, somewhere around there.
Right, exactly.
Now, with that encounter to 460 Cave, what would be the distance to there?
From there, maybe 10 minutes.
Okay. All right. Now, your friend had a farm, and I think it was your friend or a friend's friend where there was a gun in each corner because he had shot, either his dad had shot it or he had shot it.
Yeah, you're right. That was a friend of mine's friend over here in what's called the Cove.
Okay. I'm sorry, is that in Buchanan?
No, it's in Tazewell County.
Okay. All right. Kind of do me a favor and remind me of that.
They had things start happening around the farm over there. Animals are getting killed, goats, chickens. I mean, these were people that, they acted like they were poor. The poor thing you were saying, but they had money. I mean, they were the third generation of agriculture and carrying on farming. And it was a big place. I think they had that one farm was 600 and some acres. And a lot of their stuff had been disappearing, and they'd been hearing howling and things going on that, they made them suspect that they thought they was wolves. But, I mean, there was no wolves around here that I know of. Never has been for years and years. And they caught a look at one, and they thought it was a great big wolf till it stood up. Well, then they got the bright idea to try to eradicate them. So him and his, I can't say that on here, but word for Dodo, his father, got the bright idea to spotlight one.
Okay.
And they carried through with their plans against all advice from anybody else, including myself and my friend at the time, not to do it. Well, they done it. Got one in their sights, and he shot. He did kill it, but it was not a full grown. That's what I would consider an adult, I guess. And they had hit it high through the shoulders, and it went right above the brisket, right in between the shoulder blade, and where it come out, it busted its spine. So it dropped it dead. And they got the bright idea they wanted to keep the body. First, they wanted to get rid of it, and his son John was all for getting rid of it. And then at the last second, the dad wants to keep the corpse to get it mounted. I mean, I'd like to see the look on a taxidermist's face when the old man would have rolled in with this thing.
Yeah.
But I actually got to look at it while it was frozen, and I would say it was probably 130 to 150 pounds soaking wet. It was not very big. It wasn't really what you say thick. It was musky. You could tell, even though it was frozen solid in the bottom of a freezer in the bottom of a dairy barn in the basement, it was still a good size. It was cut, but it wasn't real big like a weight bill lifter as most people see them. And it was a male, and I was, aside from being one of the ugliest things I ever laid my eyes on, it looked like its ears were too big for its body. It hadn't grown into it. So yes, it did have claws. They were about 1.25 inches to 1.5 inches long, solid black. The edges weren't very sharp, but the tips were extremely sharp. Long tail, what I could tell, I could see the end of the tail, but where it was frozen laying down on its back, the tail had frozen to the inside of its left leg, and I could see it when I could feel it. It was pretty long. It was definitely fluffy. And the weirdest looking hands you'd ever see. I mean, they almost like a paw, but the digits were elongated, and they remind you of like what a chicken bone would be. They're real thin. The fingers were really thin. Well, it looked like more than, like we have 3 joints in each finger. Yep. It's like these things had like 4 joints, maybe, but they were really long and skinny. But at the length, it looks like the hands were too big for its body. And it had these long protruding arms that come down past the tiny end, probably right close to the knee. And they were real skinny, but it looked like the forearm was longer than the bicep arm. That part of the arm was, the forearm was extremely long. I mean, freakish looking long. I mean, it was something that was freaky looking. And they wrapped it back up, and they got the bright idea to, well, he didn't. His father got the bright idea to mount it, and he caught his father. He was 60-some years old at the time, and he had gone to a cattle market over in Narrows, Virginia. And he get I guess you could say the brighter side of smarts kicked in, and his son called a couple of his buddies and had them haul the carcass out of there while he was gone. And when they went back to look for the carcass, it didn't last but a few hours, and it was gone, completely gone. I don't know if they carried it off, somebody come back and got it. I don't know, but it was gone. And a friend of mine took the head off of it, because he was one of those doing it. He took a hatchet, carved the head off from the neck while it was gone, and was going to keep it. And that didn't go so well for him either. Let's put it this way. He ended up having to fight something off one night that he couldn't see, but he knew pretty much what it was. Barking down over the hill, coming through the laurel, running back, screaming, and he fought his way out of that for that night. When the night passed, he got rid of that body part too. And it was just a rigmarole and a mess. But yeah, that's the other one over here that was close that had an idiot for a father, or one decided he wanted a mantelpiece instead of using common sense and knowing something like that does not belong.
Right. He had it in the freezer, and
with padlocks. He had a chain and padlocks on it.
Yeah. And
I don't know if he was afraid of somebody trying to steal it or it coming back. I don't know what the man was thinking.
Yeah. And I remember you said that they had a gun in every room, in every corner, out of fear, and they still left that thing.
Yeah, I mean, they had shotguns and rifles in every room in that house, in every corner. And I mean, they after they shot that, and they still had trouble. I mean, the livestock murders, they stopped, but they would run around the house at night, yipping and hollering and screaming, and so much as banging off the side of the house. After the body finally got gone, that stopped. And from what I've heard, they haven't had any more trouble with anything since then. Of course, I'm not in contact with it anymore, but I'm sure if something would have happened, I would have heard by now.
Yeah. Now, where in relation to 460 Caves is that? Where did that happen?
That happened about 20 minutes down the road from that.
Okay. So about an hour to where you are now?
Right at that hour. Right about 55 minutes. Yeah, you're right.
Okay. All right. Now, you had another friend who speared a Dogman. I believe you and I had talked about it. We think it was a pup. I actually had the guy on who shared the experience with us.
Yeah, he was the son-in-law of the friend.
Yeah.
He had married his daughter, and he was there when it happened. They were feeding the cattle and back to spear in and to get the round bale, and a bunch of screaming cut loose, and I reckon it turned both of them as white as Norwegian notebook paper.
Yeah.
And when they finally got too exposed, it was a pup. What I would say, according, he said it looked like an elongated coyote, and it might have weighed, the way they put it, 90 to 120 pounds, I think. Maybe 4.5, 5 foot tall.
And then when we had him on, or when I had him on, you were there with me. We did like a 3-way call with him. He kind of changed his tune.
He changed his tune from what his father had told me they were going to do with it.
Yeah, and it was almost like the old man was a little fearful of losing his property.
Yeah, he was fearing the DNR. Is what he was fearing.
Yes.
So he told me one thing and had his son-in-law say another, or put the fear into him, because once Bill passes, Robert stands to inherit everything, of course, with his wife. So I guess he did whatever he was told or asked to do just to keep the peace.
Right.
Saying he buried it under concrete in my hind end.
Now, that farm to the farm we had just spoken to prior to this, where in location would that be?
Oh, that was in Mercer County, West Virginia.
Ah, right. Okay. So with all of that, I literally just sat here with a piece of paper, and because I had printed out a map of Virginia and West Virginia with counties, and I have a circle of a radius where these encounters had happened, and in that radius there has been 6 deaths or missing persons. So death/missing persons, because there's still 2 people missing. 7 with the one that when I called Tazewell County and Deputy Doolittle slipped up and said, yeah, they got 2 bodies out of the culvert when they had found Richard Timothy Honecker. This is a hot spot. This area has been a hot spot for a very long time. Actually, DJ, I think when I first talked to you, you were adamant about how much of a hot spot this was.
Yeah.
What do you think makes this area such a hot spot?
If I had to guess, it's probably the places they have to hide and the shelter they have to travel through and not be seen. There's so much foliage and mountains and trees, cliffs, hollers, caves, abandoned mines, old barns, shanties, shacks. I mean, they can just disappear at any given second.
Right. Now,
and plus, the spotty population around here, you can have one neighbor, 100 yards from you, and the next neighbor could be 2 miles down the road. You just don't know. I mean, it's the perfect ground for them. It's the perfect habitat, environment, however you want to put it. I mean, it's perfect for anything, especially a cryptid hiding from man.
Yes, I agree. I'm next question. away from Dogman though, I kind of want to just ask a quick question because I've been thinking about some things, and you listen to the channel, so I had been. Steph had talked about these things that he calls pull-offs. We call them crawlers. Back in the old days, like late 1800s, early 1900s, when people were spotting these things, they were called look-behinds because people would see them behind a tree. Has there been any accounts of any kind of crawlers in that area that you know of? Any?
If there was anything as a crawler, it was that thing that I seen one night at the farm. That thing that we heard scream, and I went up there looking, and at night I got to be the stool pigeon. My brother-in-law talked me into doing it, and I think, matter of fact, I think you did a show on that.
I don't remember it. Can you? I honestly don't remember.
It had feet. It was, how would you describe this thing? It would look, maybe if you pulled, it looked like a bruised chicken. I mean, it was almost white, palely white, sticky looking, and it had its back feet or its front feet were like frog hands when the daggone thing run.
Huh. Yeah, that would definitely fit into the crawler.
That's when we heard that. That's what it was. We heard that thing into what we thought was a Dogman. Do you remember me telling you about that? Them sounds. That baby deer disappeared when in the last cut in the hay last year.
No, I don't.
Yeah, I was on your show then.
No, I don't. Can you fill me in on that? Because I don't remember
you saying. They were doing the last
that.
cut in the hay for the season, and I think it was the second week of October. It was the last cutting.
Okay.
And when we was up there putting the last of the round bells up, it was right at the edge of dark. There was a baby deer that they set out, a young deer, because it got hit.
Okay.
And we set it over toward the edge of the woods earlier, and when we went back to check on it, it was gone. The deer was gone, but there was a trail like going up the woods. And all of a sudden we heard this bunch of ruckus, like a dog fighting and something squealing way up on the mountain. And then at the last minute, we heard a yelp, so we don't know what happened. But my brother-in-law had seen this thing and described it to me, and he talked me into going back to look for it. Naturally, figuring it's right at the edge of dark, I get the bright idea that it's nocturnal, and I go up there at night by myself, which was not the smartest thing I've ever done, and I will never repeat again. Because as I'm walking down the edge of the pasture in the hayfield, there's a creek that separates the pasture, and this thing jumped up, evidently right there, hiding on the other side of the bank that separated the pasture, and jumped up and squealed at the same time. That I'm like 20 foot from it on the other side, and that's when I lost control of one of my bodily functions. And what I could see with a headlamp, this thing was exactly like I described, looked like a skinned turkey. I mean, it was no hair, no like color of the skin. You could see veins protruding through it as well as I could see as it moved. And its limbs were like you would think of Stretch Armstrong. It's like it had no bone structure at all that you could visibly see except for the spine. It looked like it had scoliosis, like the bones were almost sticking out of the skin I could see on the spine. But everything else was like wobbly, like rubber. And it had these big old long fingers that looked like they had no external or inner skeleton. They just flopped everywhere when it run. But actually it run in a way I've never seen. It was wild looking. It was amazing. At the same time, it was scary as Hades.
I remember now when you said Stretch Armstrong. I remember that experience. Yes, I remember you were pretty freaked out, actually.
I don't know if this thing, I guess if there was anything that was close enough to be a crawler from what I've seen and heard, this was it.
Yeah.
Weird looking thing, big old bug eyes.
With all of the old mines in your area. And
perfect for that kind of.
Absolutely. And I've been thinking, people, I've been looking up because I had the theory about Tom Mezek and possibly something coming down and grabbing him up. And now I'm like, well, maybe I'm thinking of the wrong cryptid.
You possibly could be.
And these things are pulling people down or, into a cave.
Right.
That would explain the lack of finding any kind of weaponry, clothing, whatever. And it very easy, because who's going to go into, a small little cave? These things are narrow and scrawny and elongated. So they'd be able to fit into a cave that maybe a human being couldn't. But if they're dragging a dead body into one of these things, they're just going to make it go. I mean, reports of these things are very strong. So, yeah, I'm almost wondering if, because the case with Richard Timothy Honecker, which was in Tazewell, I believe when you lived in Tazewell, I think it was like maybe 20 minutes from your house.
Correct.
They had searched that culvert the year prior, and then a year later, he's there. Another body's in there with him. He's not totally put together. So I'm wondering maybe if it was one of those things, and just that would be its dumping ground.
It could be a good possibility, because your idea just struck a string with me. The description of this thing would be like subterranean.
Yeah.
No skin pigment, no sun, a very, very bad lack of vitamin K was evident in the skin. No hair, what I could see on its body, what little I seen of it, and almost like it would be blind, like it seen no sunlight. Matter of fact, it would strike you as the type to live underground the way it looked. And now that brings it to mind, there is sinkholes up on the farm. There's sinkholes in 2 or 3 different places where it actually opens down into the soil.
Yeah.
Big hole.
Yeah, I'm curious if maybe these are not all, but if these are a big cause of the disappearance / deaths. I mean, it makes sense to me. It makes a lot of sense to me, because, here I am thinking maybe Tom Mezek got pulled up into a tree, but his gun would drop.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it just makes no sense.
That's a good point, Jeff. And
maybe these things are that intelligent that they know how to do the cleanup, let's get everything, gun, just hide it.
Right.
Or they have no idea what it is. He's got it in his hands and they just want it too, not to use as a gun, but, it's just something extra that they have in their lair or whatever, like
correct.
A trophy.
Yeah. Just like the giant that was supposedly killed in Kandahar, Afghanistan, when they approached it after they had downed it, all kinds of weapons from every century of man. AK-47, spears, battle axes, swords, you name it.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely that area, the circle that I just made, Virginia, West Virginia, Tazewell, Mercer, Buchanan counties, is a hot spot for cryptid paranormal activity, not just Dogman. One last thing before we end the upload. Bigfoot. Have there been, growing up, you grew up in Tazewell?
Yes.
Okay. Did you ever recall any of the old timers or anybody talk about Bigfoot when you were growing up?
I've never heard anything referred to as Bigfoot.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard them called brush boogers.
Brush boogers, okay.
Yeah, that's what that AKA was the Bigfoot, down here was brush boogers or bush ape. I've heard them called bush apes.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. It's it seems to be, you've got caves, you've got water, you have mountains.
Minecraft.
Yeah, you've just got areas to hide everything. Yeah, it's
run down homes, barns, shacks, old buildings, factories that are shut down. You got it all. I mean, they've got everything they could ever need. I mean, everything that you could ever want to set up and have a home or a part-time place to rest or to feed or whatever, they've got it.
Yeah. And it makes a lot of sense now that I'm sitting here talking to you. It makes a lot of sense how the last discovery, the police department handled that case.
Right on.
They announced it on Facebook, and they were secretive about it, but not really, because they like I said, they had made the announcement, but they also kind of cordoned everything off.
Right.
And found a body. The body was not put together, and he had only been gone for,
a year.
A year. And in a cave.
Right.
So there's 2 bodies found in underground dwellings, which could definitely be these things called the crawler or whatever you want to call them. God, what's it like? Last question. What's it like living in a cryptid hotspot?
Just the same as everyday life, I consider it. I've been around and heard so much that it's nothing new to me. Yeah. Now, if I start to see, things walking around at night with capes, that hadn't turned into bats, that might be something new to me. But as far as everything else goes, it's pretty much neutral. I mean, it's something that you don't hardly see, but if I seen it, it wouldn't bother me that bad.
Yeah.
Anything's possible in this world. Anything is possible.
Very true. Very true. In Virginia, for some reason, has always kind of been a hot spot for not just Dogman, not just crawler, not Bigfoot, but for like the snellygaster.
Yeah.
And God, what's the other thing? Not a bipedal, it's a quadruped dog, like a black dog that is seen sometimes with or in correlation with the snellygaster.
Black shuck, as the English call it.
Right, yeah, as the English call it, but there's a different name for it, and that I had remembered.
Hellhound or some things.
Just a real interesting area.
Yeah, well, if you remember Victor, even I think that might have been off the record, not recorded, but even Victor admitted that Virginia, and especially this area, was a hot spot for about everything cryptid.
Yeah, yeah.
And for that man to admit that should say something.
Yeah, yeah. Mothmen have been spotted there, I believe.
Only out from here on up to Point Pleasant, West Virginia, especially.
Yeah, yeah. So it's definitely a place of mystery and, even paranormal, not just cryptid.
Oh, paranormal. Yeah, there's ghost stories around every bend down here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Every holler has its own story.
Which is definitely an interesting topic.
Well, one thing I've learned over the years, even from the old timers, for every legend, there's an ounce of truth behind everything.
Yeah, yeah.
And stories change from person to person, from generation to generation, but there's always an ounce of truth in it somewhere.
Yeah, yeah. And if you notice, movies and TV programs are almost getting really eerily close to what we are talking about on a daily basis here.
Yes, sir.
Soft disclosure.
Right on.
Well, DJ, it was great having you on. I appreciate you taking some time to kind of discuss this area. Be safe and, definitely turn your floodlights on before you go outside to walk your dogs.
No, I don't have to do that no more, buddy. We've got a dust dawn light in here now.
There you go.
We've had enough, so we had that turned on last week.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, I hope that you don't have any more run-ins with the whatever large Dogman, a female Dogman, and a pup. I hope you don't have any more run-ins. And if you do, I hope it's just the pup. And maybe you'd be able to get a picture of that little guy. That'd be pretty amazing.
I'd like to, but if I had my way about it, I'd hope all of them go to Vegas and the mother and father have a jump wedding and go to God knows wherever, just as long as out of my crap.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, brother, it was great having you on. Thank you very much. Would you like to say anything to the audience before we go?
I'm just glad that people are opening their eyes and ears and seeing that, fiction is becoming reality.
Very true. Very true. Thank you, DJ.
And thank you, Jeff, for bringing us the truth. You have a good evening.
You as well, my friend.
Bye-bye.
Wow. I really enjoy having DJ on. I enjoy talking with him. He's a very interesting fellow. A good friend. He became a very good friend. And the area where he lives is a true hotspot. And no exaggeration, you can look it up in the newspaper. We're talking 6 to 7. I say 7 because that unnamed body in that culvert with Richard Timothy Honecker found within Tazewell, Buchanan, and Mercer County, West Virginia. 2 counties in Virginia, 1 county in West Virginia. 6 to 7 bodies, possibly even more. On top of the man named Eric Smith, who disappeared, 12 years ago. It never, ever seems to stop in this area. And the local law enforcement is right on top of it. They are on top of keeping it quiet. They do a fairly decent job, though. They really do. But if you pay attention and you have boots on the ground, you can figure things out, which I have. Now, I'm not just saying all of these accounts are Dogman. I'm not saying all these deaths, all these disappearances are Dogman related. They could be something far worse, far scarier, far more demonic. Who knows? I don't know. But I know that I enjoyed today's upload, and I hope you guys did as well. And with that, may the Great Spirit watch over us all. May He guide us down that path that we call life.